Hey humans, how's it going? Susan Ruth here. Thanks for listening to another episode of Hey Human Podcast. This is episode 404, and my guest is Dianna Cohen. Dianna is a visual artist and activist. She's the CEO and co-founder of Plastic Pollution Coalition, a nonprofit communications and advocacy organization that, quote, collaborates with an expansive global alliance of organizations, businesses, and individuals to create a more just, equitable, regenerative world free of plastic pollution and its toxic impacts, unquote. It was a great conversation. She's a fascinating woman. I met her at a party a couple weeks back, and we were talking about art and getting the tour of a house where there was a bunch of art on the walls, and we got to chatting, and she told me about her work, and I thought, wow, this woman's fascinating. I need to have her on the show. The research out these days, we talk about this on the episode, but I just want to say the research out now is showing that plastics have permeated our human bodies to the extent that it's in the placentas, it's in the babies being born, it's in our bodies. They say it's a credit card worth of plastic per week we're ingesting, and something has to be done. And Dianna is on the forefront of making sure that we can have a world where we are clear and clean of such pollutants, because the impact of such things is going to be devastating in the near future. And she talks about some of the scenarios that could transpire if we don't get this rectified. All right, well, I've got a Patreon. That's big new news. I'm so excited. It's patreon.com/SusanRuthism, SusanRuthism. I'm building a community there for Hey Human and all my other artistic things that I do. Hope you'll be a part of it. Firstly, I want to keep this show ad-free, and the Patreon is definitely going to help with that. And secondly, I want to do something special for you with blog posts, musical performances, bonus content, my thoughts on any given day. I want this to be a place where we can connect and grow with each other. I'll ask questions, and hopefully we'll start building a community where y'all feel like it's a safe place to just, chatter with me. And so check that out. It's on Patreon. Okay. General stuff. Check out Hey Human Podcast for links and to learn more about my guests and the show. Check out SusanRuth.com to learn about me and my other artistic endeavors. And follow Susan Ruthism and Hey Human Podcast on social media. Find my records on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, wherever you get your music. My most recent album was All I Ever Wanted Was Everything. So go check that out. Rate, review, and subscribe to Hey Human Podcast on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. It's pretty much on every platform at this point. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for being a part of this. And yeah, be well. Stay safe out there. Be love. And here we go. Dianna Cohen, welcome to Hey Human.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
I'd like to start every episode finding out where my guest is from, what shaped you as a person that led you down the channel of who you were to become.
Yeah, I was born here in Southern California and grew up here. I think I probably have an accent that gives me away. Growing up, I really thought of myself as an artist. I love to paint. I painted and drew all the time. And when I got into high school, became very interested in biology and science. Then I went really far away for university. I went to UCLA. And I started out as a biology major. I was at school there for a couple of years. And during the course of that time, read a book called The Double Helix by James Watson. I actually read that right after my freshman summer. It was recommended to me by my biology of cancer professor. And after I read it, I had this kind of epiphany that that James Watson was a curator, and that it was Watson and Crick who had won the Nobel Prize in Science for coming up with the shape and the form of the double helix for DNA. And I thought, this guy spent time going around and meeting with other scientists and looking at their work and their crystallography work, and he kind of put it all together. So he was able to be creative in the sciences. And I had this epiphany that I wanted to be creative immediately, and felt frustrated that I was recognizing or discovering this right after my freshman year. And so I began the process of transferring to the art department. When I arrived in the art department, everybody was walking around with copies of Chaos Theory by James Gleick under their arm. And I was like, oh my God, my people. I found my people. I would say, if I have one piece of constructive criticism for the University of California campus in Los Angeles, it's that the arts and the sciences should be closer together and not at polar opposite ends of the campus. But let me go back in time, actually, to junior high school and high school. When I was 13, my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer that was estrogen receptive, which didn't mean a lot to me at the time, but it was part of what piqued my interest in science and studying biology and wanting to do preventative cancer research, et cetera. And she passed away when I was 17. She was 43 when she died.
What's her name?
Her name was Helene Cohen. She was a very cool person. She was the executive director of the Los Angeles Free Clinic, and she also was the executive director of the Hollywood Human Services Project. So she was working in human services and helping people. And my sister and I grew up stuffing envelopes for the LA Free Clinic. I sold my first small sculpture or paint, I think it was a drawing actually, that I had made to Sally Struthers at a fundraiser for the Los Angeles Free Clinic.
That's amazing.
Kind of fun. And Sally Struthers was on a television show called All in the Family that I absolutely loved, one of Norman Lear's shows. But anyway, so, all of this didn't mean that much to me. And then my life progressed and I pursued art as a career. And at some point went from painting to collage work, working with paper and brown paper from bags, deconstructing them, and then adding bits and pieces of plastic bags. And the first time I made a piece where I added a plastic bag into the piece, I was in Belgium. It was a bag from a homeopathic pharmacy. It had an image of a dandelion printed on it with the name written in Latin. And I thought, this is so deeply ironic to print the image of a plant on a plastic bag. And again, this is more than 30 years ago. So this is not having any knowledge. I wasn't thinking, oh my gosh, what's plastic made out of? I wasn't thinking anything about it. I was not an activist when it came to plastic at that time. Anyway, so I started making this work and then had the opportunity to do some gallery shows with it, and then to show it in foundations and in some museum exhibits that were traveling. And I started also getting invited to talk, to give the keynote, to give the opening talk. And all of this was kind of happening along the path at the same time that some of the bags in some of my pieces were starting to fissure and break apart. And I thought that it meant that the plastic was organic and ephemeral like us. So I began trying to understand that better. This predates all of us having the internet and the world encyclopedia at our fingertips. So trying to figure out what was going on there. I'm also an avid gardener and lover of nature, and plants and animals. So, also trying to understand the relationship between plastic and nature. And that's when I started to understand that plastic, or 99% of plastics, are made out of fossil fuels and petrochemicals. So it's basically made out of oil and fracked and cracked gas. And to better understand that, I was continuing to see more and more of it, particularly in the ocean. When I was 25, I became a certified PADI diver. When I was 30, I decided I was going to learn how to longboard. So I'm an eternally aspiring longboarder, surfer, and I love to body surf and just be in the water. And I'm not in the water as much as I would like to be. But in the course of my lifetime, I have seen more and more and more plastic washed up everywhere. And it initially, I would just gather it, collect it, tuck it in my bathing suit, my bikini, my top, tie it, come out, look for a garbage can, because and then, starting to look for a recycling container, but now coming full circle, realizing that plastic was never designed to be recycled, and plastic is still not designed to be recycled. So
It's a big myth that people think that all this hard work that humans are doing in their homes to try and recycle, and it's not happening.
Yeah, I really prefer not to focus my energy on any of that because the health impacts are so much more glaring, in my opinion, that focusing our energy on all the downstream solutions like cleanup, ocean cleanup, recycling, which is, we now know is mythology when it comes to plastic, all of that is not where I want to focus my energy. And so I began first I thought I want to come up with a plan to go out and clean up the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. I had heard about the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. I thought I could travel there. I thought it was floating on top of the water. I thought it was an island. I thought I could collect it. I thought if I went out with a cargo ship and a giant crane and some chipping machine that could take up to 50% organic matter. I was talking to these brothers who had a machine like that in Utah. And then I was going to chip it up and cold mold it and turn it into bricks. I had like this whole game plan with decommissioned fishing trawlers, and that I could travel to a place and it was just sitting there waiting for me. But I began talking with Captain Charlie Moore, Enrique Sala from Pristine Seas, Nat Geo, David Rothschild, Dr. Sylvia Earle, slowly kind of gathering a group of trusted advisors who had much more experience in this space and knowledge than I did. And literally what all of them said to me is, you can't clean this up. You cannot clean it up. It's not in one place. I probably learned the most about it from Captain Moore, who said it is in all the water strata. The Great Pacific Garbage Patch is spread out depending on whether it's an El Nino or La Nina year. It's at different latitudes. It's spread out over at least 2,000 square miles, if not wider. It's in all of the water strata. It's on the ocean floor. We don't know how much. People are constantly trying to quantify it. But I mean, really, the idea of cleanup is a total distraction. And what's been happening while everybody's focused on the downstream cleanup, recycle of it, the petrochemical industry and the plastic industry have just ramped up production to make more.
Yeah, they just keep making more. Yeah.
So anyway, I mean, all of this kind of, and my artwork brought me full circle back to beginning to need to understand that plastic and the manufacturing of plastic and our use of it impacts our health and impacts human health and animal health and everything on the planet, but that it pollutes us from extraction through manufacturing and production. If it's single use, very short amount of time that humans are using it. We now know that there are microplastics in our beverages and microplastics in our food. And when you look at micro images, even of the plastic bag that's inside of a cracker box or a cereal box, you can see tiny little filaments and fissures, and there's a certain percentage of it that's getting into our food and therefore getting into us.
Yeah, they just released that study that said that every placenta they tested, not some, every placenta they tested had plastic.
So they're finding microplastics in placenta, both on the mother's side and the baby's side. They're finding plastics in human brains. They're finding it in our hearts and in the plaque and in our veins and arteries. They're finding it, in different parts of our bodies. So it's funny because a long time ago, I read a book by Michael Pollan called The Omnivore's Dilemma. And he started out the intro in the book by saying, we are people of the corn. Like, we have figured out how to turn corn into thousands of different chemicals and additives and fillers and sugars and things that we add to processed foods, right? So in a sense, we are people of the corn. But I think at this point, we are people of the plastic. Just in the last couple of years, there's been research that shows that on average, people are ingesting or eating a credit card's worth of plastic a week. And additionally, and this has just come out in the last year, we're additionally inhaling an additional credit card's worth of plastic a week. So that brings me all back to the kind of cancer that my mom had, which was estrogen receptive, and understanding that the chemicals that are used to make plastics, again, 99% of the carbon source is coming from oil, petrochemicals, fracked and cracked gas, but the additives, like you've heard of BPA or bisphenols, BPA substitutes, BPB, BPS, BPZ, or phthalates. Bisphenols are added to make the plastic transparent, translucent, and rigid. And phthalates are added to make the plastic supple and malleable and rubbery, like for toys and things like that. These two groups of chemicals have both been identified and are known endocrine disruptors, which means they turn things on and off in our body when you don't want them turned on and off. And they function in like synthetic estrogen. So, in a sense, they make our bodies hold more fat. And these chemicals, BPA probably being studied the most, but bisphenols and phthalates have been linked to obesity, to diabetes, to breast cancer, brain cancer, and prostate cancer, and to all different kinds of fertility issues, including infertility and lower sexual function.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a great book that came out about a year and a half ago by Dr. Shauna Swan that's called Countdown. And it's about the decline in fertility for both men and women, and that we are on track right now to have men with sperm count 0. We're also seeing that animals and even bacteria, microorganisms in the ocean, plankton and microorganisms, that there are organisms that are more attracted to plastic than the food that they're meant to eat. So when you end up with plastics or microplastics or those tiny little nurdles like pre-consumer plastic pellets and things like that, which get out into the waterway and end up in the oceans and our lakes and rivers, et cetera, in the environment, that can be very attractive to animals. It also looks like fish eggs or eggs from other animals. And yeah, everybody's ingesting it. I mean, when we first started this work, I think they were finding plastic in the intestinal tracts of something like 67%. Don't quote me on the number. It was either 67 or 68%, or it might have been invert those numbers of sea turtles, but they're now finding it in 100% of sea turtles.
Every time they open up a whale that's washed ashore, all they find is plastic inside of them.
But I mean, for me, all of these animals ingesting the plastic is just a metaphor for what we're doing to ourselves, and we're doing it with the chemicals from plastic. So, I mean, back to that whole chain, that chain not only poisons all of us and contributes directly to climate change in production, because plastics are primarily made from fossil fuels and extraction, but it disproportionately impacts low-income communities, rural communities, brown communities, Black communities, indigenous communities. I mean, even here where I live in central and mid-city Los Angeles, if I just drive a few miles south, I'm at Baldwin Hills, and those are functioning oil fields. And a lot of my friends who live in that area suffer from higher levels of health issues that have been directly attributed to those, being exposed to those oil wells and the air quality there, et cetera. And that can be anything from nosebleeds and asthma to, cancer and much more, and fertility issues.
Mm-hmm.
What I realized when we co-founded Plastic Pollution Coalition, which was in 2009, what I came to realize is that we need to focus on all the upstream leverage points. And that is everything from changing policy and legislation to changing the narrative to providing resources, which we do as Plastic Pollution Coalition, to educate, connect, and advocate with our coalition members. Our mission statement has evolved over the course of the time since we were co-founded, because we're going into our 15th year. And it's evolved to us recognizing that we are a communications and advocacy organization working towards a more just, equitable, regenerative world free of plastic pollution and its toxic impact. So it's a mouthful, and our name, Plastic Pollution Coalition, is a mouthful. But we thought it was really important to call it what it is. And I think that that's something that, big companies and corporations and marketing spend a lot of money calling things other things, clever things like adding the word debate onto climate change. What did that make us all do? Spiral around and waste our time for 30 years, I mean, come on. So we thought it was really important, if 70 to 90% of the marine debris that we're finding in the sea and the ocean is plastic, let's call it plastic. And when it gets in the environment, let's call it plastic pollution. And when it gets in our body, let's call it plastic pollution.
What happens when you go on the Hill to talk about this? Are you finding that people are receptive, or are the lobbyists too powerful to go up against?
We're finding people are very receptive to it because it's not a partisan issue. Nobody wants to be poisoned. They don't want their families to be poisoned or to poison their children or future generations. But yeah, the petrochemical and plastic industry have a lot more money than grassroots movements do. So they are always crawling all over everything.
Yeah, I'm flabbergasted by that because I think, where do you think you're going to hide from this? As you're pouring money and trying to get richer and richer and protecting your interests, not you, them, to what end?
Well, I just find it fascinating that you can go to something and meet someone who thinks that it doesn't touch them or doesn't touch their life.
Exactly.
And they're not living in reality, you know?
Do you think the idea that we are heading toward what basically means human extinction, does that ring any alarm bells? Especially considering how so many people want to be in control of reproductive rights, you would think that that would be a big red flag.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, when Shauna's book came out, she was invited to go on a lot of news and TV outlets, and it seemed like more conservative people were very, very interested in what she was talking about. They're deeply concerned about their ability, their viability, and their ability to procreate. And they may be less concerned about what happens with a kid after a baby after it's born, or giving a woman the right to control her own body. So they're off on those two counts. But it's good that they care about one aspect of it, and they should know that eating and drinking everything out of plastic bottles is contributing to their non-viability.
I mean, if I open my refrigerator right now, even my healthiest food is surrounded by plastics.
Well, in particular, I have a friend who is vegan, and she's very dedicated, and she travels a lot for work and speaks and works on climate, solutions. And she travels with a whole suitcase full of plastic wrapped food. I don't know if it's nuts or fruit or what it is from the health food store. I kind of don't get that. I mean, my favorite thing to do if I'm home or traveling is try to figure out where the open farmers markets are and go with a reusable bag or basket and talk to some of the farmers and buy local seasonal food. But, maybe in a way that's a luxury.
Well, certainly, I would say that that's definitely like it's sort of interesting, there seems to be an awareness without really understanding what that awareness is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like they're heading in the direction that needs to be headed without even really the correlation.
Well, I mean, I honestly, to me, none of this is a political issue. This is about self-reliance, which I think everybody would like to be more self-reliant. And yet, if we live in cities or towns, we live in community too. So, what's best for the community? Is it better for your community and your school that your kids go to replace the lead pipes with copper pipes and not with plastic PVC pipes? Yes. Is it better in the course of swapping out getting rid of those lead pipes to provide filters or filtration system for water or filtered water in general for all schools and all public buildings? As a kid growing up, there were drinking fountains everywhere. Nobody would have ever thought of carrying a bottle, let alone there were no plastic bottles to carry when I was a kid. And you would just be at the park playing or, at the library, and you'd go to the drinking fountain, get some water.
How have your habits changed overall, do you think, the more that you know?
I don't eat out as much. I try to factor a little more time into the businesses that I do go to when I eat out. I carry bamboo utensil set with me. I don't have it right in front of me, but I was just given a new one at something else I was at. So pretty cool. Fork, knife, spoon, chopsticks. I augment it by adding a stainless steel straw because Sometimes when I drink iced tea, I like to have a straw. And but I was just given this at an event that I went to. And but I carry one that's a little shabbier looking than that because I've been carrying it for a long time in my purse. I carry those. I carry, reusable bags with me. I plan ahead. There's a Korean restaurant that I love, and I've gotten to know them. They've gotten to know me, and I can go in with, I'm going to show you just because it's
Yeah.
really fun. I go in with this basket that I have. You can hear me, how noisy I am. I go in with this basket and I bring stainless steel containers, and they do the soup and the food for me in these two containers. This one has like 3 different sections. And
Yeah.
I order it there. I pass them my basket. They take the containers, they put everything in it. I bring it home. We all eat dinner. I wash them. I take them back like a week or 2 later to the same place. So I think that's a really nice thing to do with
It's a great idea.
companies that you get to know. And you can do the same thing with a reusable steel cup or a reusable ceramic mug. Get into a relationship with your local coffee shop or tea shop or wherever you go by every day and like to hang out. And many of them, especially chains, now give you a discount when you come in with your own cup. Of course, it should be clean, but and that's what I use when I travel too. So they're little things, and those are personal things that you can do that just make you feel better.
I ask for porcelain now when I go into coffee shops because I realize you have to heat that when that hot food touches these things, it's melting that plastic and I'm eating it.
Yeah, I mean, styrofoam foams, polystyrene is horrible. It gives off a neurotoxin. And I will never forget, like, going back to UCLA when we were doing screenings of a couple documentaries, a film called Tapped, a film called Bag It, a film called Plastic Paradise. And I was meeting people at North Campus where I used to hang out, and they had suddenly switched all the reusables on campus to polystyrene. So everybody was walking around with hot soup and hot tea and hot coffee in polystyrene. I think that the UCs have made a commitment to move away from that, and they're also honoring students with reusables now. But I was horrified when I saw them. So
Yeah, I mean, the instance Alzheimer's, dementia, the cancer rates are skyrocketing, the blood diseases.
yeah. Oh, and babies exposed to the chemicals from plastic, again, mainly the one that's been studied probably the most is BPA, but this would go for BPA substitutes, which I've been told are equally bad, if not worse, to BPA. That's been studied with newborn babies, and it's been linked to shortened anogenital distance, smaller penis size, feminization of boys, so boys getting breast buds, breasts, early menses in girls, so girls getting their period younger and younger and younger, attention deficit disorder, autism, and lower IQ.
There you go.
I'm like, cheers.
And I mean, the simple act of, as you do, bringing a basket with the stainless steel, that's so easy to do. I think that people likely will be embarrassed in the beginning to do that. You feel like, oh, do I look weird? Am I putting someone out? Is that once we get over that hump, it's going to be a lot easier.
Well, I think if you feel unsure about it, the way you can start is by, if it's a place you usually go, talk to the people at the counter, talk to the manager, talk to the owner, and just say, listen, I'm very committed to reducing my plastic footprint. Or sometimes I tell people I'm allergic to plastic because I am.
We all are, technically.
I was wondering if next time I come in, if I could bring my own containers from home. If they're clean, could you just put the food that I'm buying in those? Because there are also great glass containers with lids that lock down. And you could also you don't have to have these kind of fancy things that I have. You could just bring a steel pot with a lid on it. And I remember seeing people do that, for example, in Spain with a local place that makes really good paella, and they'd literally buy a paella from them and then return the paella pan, or they'd drop off their own pan and they'd make it for them. So it's a form of to-go food, but using a reuse refill model.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. They're on Montana by my house here. There is a a store that it's non-plastic store, and they have shampoo pellets and all the things are little piles of stuffs instead of in anything. You come in with your glass
Neat.
jar and you fill up your shampoo.
Oh, that's great. Where is that on
It's
Montana?
about, I'm gonna say 17th-ish, 16th, 17th, yeah.
17? Oh, cool. I'll check that. Do you know what it's
Not
called?
off the top of my head, but I'll text it. I'll text
There,
it to
there,
you.
there, okay, there are all these reuse and real refill shops opening. I know there's a new one in
There's one in Los
Pasadena. I know
Feliz on
there's one in
Vermont.
Venice. Yeah. And I remember one of the first ones, a lot of them are coalition members of ours. I remember one of the first ones that opened was in Ventura, in the town of Ventura in Ventura County. And it's called like Refill Shop, spelled SHOPPE or something like that. But that was one of the first shops I saw do that. Although I think back to my childhood when I was like a tween or pre-tween, I used to get paid chump change, kid change for helping pack people's bags at Erewhon Market before it became a hipster chain. Erewhon at the time, this is in the 70s, sold everything in big barrels and stuff like that. And you'd use scoopers and you'd bring your own container or have little paper bags and things that you'd put stuff in. It was like very normal. It's not like this idea of reuse and refill or being able to buy things from a bulk store. It's not a new concept.
And it only takes a little bit of
Yeah.
an adjustment from what we're used to.
Yeah, you have to think ahead so that you bring things with you and are prepared. But yes. Oh, there's a great shop too that I walked into on Ventura Boulevard now too, like near, I want to say Laurel Canyon. There's
I
one
mean, I
there
think
too.
that the idea of it is getting more and more popularized and widespread as people are starting to pay more attention. You get the babies involved and people are really starting to pay attention. You tell moms that their placenta has plastic in it. I think that's a huge wake-up call. Talk a little bit more about the coalition and the aim and how people might become a part of it.
Yeah. So we created the coalition back in 2009. We've slowly grown. The first year, I think at the beginning, we were like 25 groups. Then the next year, we were 100 groups. A couple businesses joined us. One of the first companies that joined us is NatraCare, which does like feminine hygiene products. That was really cool. And then we kind of thought, wow, businesses could join us too. So we've been developing and have new parameters for the businesses that are joining us. But we're about 50-50. We're over 1,000 members. We're about 50% businesses, 50% organizations from 75 countries around the world. And when we created Plastic Pollution Coalition, our first goal was, and our first campaign was called Call It What It Is. If it's primarily plastic that we're talking about, rather than calling it marine debris, litter, rubbish, waste, garbage, trash, call it plastic pollution, call it plastic. So that was our first campaign. And then the next one was to take that model that is taught to us as kids, the 3 R's, reduce, reuse, recycle, and add a 4th R onto the front, which is whenever possible, refuse plastic, refuse single-use plastic. And that's a fun one and really fun with kids because kids like to be able to say no to something and they have to say yes to so many things that their parents tell them that they have to do. So that was really fun. But I've come to learn more about it too in the time that we've been doing this work. For example, I learned that Keep America Beautiful and the whole Keep Blank Beautiful campaign was created by industry. And it was created by industry in response to the first Earth Day in 1970. And it was created to distract the public and to push the responsibility for pollution onto the public. It's a little bit like a smoke and mirrors game. I don't know if you are familiar with that commercial with the actor who was portraying an indigenous man, a crying Indian, and he's watching all this pollution happen around him. And at the end, he turns towards the camera and a tear rolls down his face. And the tagline, if you look at that commercial, is "People start pollution, people can stop it." So, it was a big ploy by industry. It was very effective. They spent millions and millions of dollars on it, and they continue to spend money on that today. And even the numbers 1 through 6 or 7 that are on the bottom of every plastic container, on the side of it, on the back of it, Those have nothing to do with whether that plastic is recycled or not. Plastic's not designed to be recycled. Those numbers simply identify the polymer type. And I believe it's 6 or 7. 7 is other. So it's everything, even bioplastics. And so that is greenwashing.
Yeah, I mean, they're putting plastics over your fruits and vegetables. I'm actually, in preparation for speaking with you, I got an apple from the grocery store, a non-organic, just an apple, a red delicious, and I have set it outside to sit in the sun. How long do you think a regular apple would last like that? Maybe a week or something, and
maybe before you started seeing something.
Has
maybe.
Not still as hard as it was, impenetrable. It's absolutely fine.
It may have like a slightly plasticky or wax coating on the exterior too. Yeah, I don't really know about the length of time. I just know some things are toxic and some things
So
aren't.
if the food doesn't smell like the food anymore, we got a problem. Tell people how they can reach out to you.
So we're at plasticpollutioncoalition.org. You're welcome to join us. You can sign up or join us as an individual. You can join us as, again, an organization if you have one, or a business. A lot of kids are involved with our coalition. We have tons of resources on our website. We produce a monthly webinar series. We just had one that was really, really, really great. We do a slight cleanup of them and we archive them so it'll be up on our website next week. But we have about 2.5 years or 3 years of webinars on all different topics, but all related to plastic and plastic pollution and solutions on our site. And those are just free and available. You can watch them or listen to them anytime. We gathered a ton of resources and have been involved in producing various animations, climations, short cartoon pieces, short film pieces, feature-length documentaries, and things are at all different levels. So if you're working with kids, we have a whole section and you can look that up. We worked with one of our coalition members as Cafeteria Culture, and they created a great documentary that's really wonderful for kids. Another one of my favorite short animations for kids to watch, but adults as well, was created by Story of Stuff, and it's called The World We Want. And it's a story about Sharon Levine, who founded Rise St. James, and she's based in Louisiana, near Baton Rouge. And it's just about growing up there and their home and their kind of little farm that she lived on with her family, all the natural things that were around them. And they had cows for milk and chickens, etc. And then she remembers all mainly a lot of the men in her community getting excited about the first petrochemical plant that came in, the first facility, and how they thought it would bring economic, boost to their community and provide jobs. And after many years and more facilities coming in, she realized that it was just bringing illness and death to her community. And so she became an activist. And she's been fighting with everybody there on the front line, the fence line, and has had some very successful wins. But I love this animation that's like a 3 or 4 minute animation because she narrates it, but it really starts out with her as a child.
Okay, great.
It's powerful. So there's just tons of resources. And then additionally to all of these are in a carousel at the top of our website. We have our Flip the Script on Plastics in Film and Television. So that's about changing film and television, not just behind the scenes in production, but also changing the narrative and what you see on screen and in our storytelling. We also have a project called the Global Plastic Laws Database that we built that is a living database. And you can find laws from all over the world there. It's robust and it continues to evolve. We also created a tool called the upscorecard.org, the Understanding Packaging Scorecard. And that is something that businesses can go and do a comparison and take a look at different materials for takeaway and packaging for their food. What I love about it is we were able to build it with people from Sodexo, Aramark, Compass at Google, Subway, the Food Packaging Forum in Switzerland, Plastic Pollution Coalition. Wonderful tool, and it looks at 6 different parameters, but the ones I'm most excited about are it looks at plastic not by weight, but by quantity, amount. It looks at climate impact, and it also looks at chemicals of concern, which other tools do not look at because people don't want to go there, because companies don't want to be responsible, and because people who are packaging their food or transferring it in these things have just, it's better. Ignorance is bliss.
Yeah.
I think that's a really valuable tool as well. And then we're working on policy and legislation. So at the federal level, we're supporting the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act and the Right to Repair Act. And then at the international level, we're involved in supporting and pushing for a strong UN Global Plastics Treaty. And that is being drafted. It's been being drafted for the last year and a half. And that will continue starting this weekend and next week at E404 in Ottawa, Canada.
With all of this going on, do you still have time for your artwork?
Not as much time, but I look at everything that I'm doing as the biggest art piece I've ever worked on in my life. So
yeah, I bet your mom is so proud of you.
I think my mom is proud of both my sister and I. My sister, Julia, has a master's in public health, and she's our managing director. She's based in Washington, D.C., and just spent all last week having meetings on Capitol Hill and at the White House. So, yeah.
Love it. I really appreciate your time today, and I'm glad you're on the planet trying to save it and all of us.
Thank you. Thanks, Susan. Thank you for having me on your show.
Absolutely. It's my honor. And thank you for listening, everyone. We've got lots of ideas. You know, there's that saying that it takes a village, but I like to say not only does it take a village, but one can be a lot. And, you know, if everyone does something, it's something. It's better than doing nothing. You know, you make a difference.
Absolutely.
It makes a difference.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. Bye, everybody.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. All right. Have a wonderful day.
Okay,
right,
you too.
See ya. Bye.
Bye.
Rate, review, and subscribe to Hey Human on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks. Bye.